702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the most important insights, thoughts, comments, and questions, I suppose, that have been on the show this week. If you'd like to hear more, if you think maybe someone you know, someone in your life could benefit from hearing it, please go to your podcast app and search for The Money Show. It's always a good idea to just send it on a little bit. To start, some of the news stories that we thought were important this week. The White House announcing it was imposing another 25% tariff on goods from India. That means the total tariff from India on Indian goods into the US is now 50%. Business Leadership South Africa and Business Unity South Africa, they've both urged Eskom to stop its legal action against NERSA, the energy regulator, for awarding 5 electricity trading licenses to 5 different companies. I mean, it's an issue that gets to the heart of our sort of energy transition, what's changing regarding electricity in our society. And the global ratings agency S&P, they flagged a fiscal risk as the ANC really said that it was very angry with the idea that the Reserve Bank and the Reserve Bank governor, I suppose, Lesetja Kganyago, had announced the Monetary Policy Committee decision to target the lower end of the inflation band. Tonight, we bring you a mixture of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. This week, our shapeshifter, July Ndlovu, the CEO of Thungela Resources, reflecting on his incredible story, becoming one of our most successful coal mining executives. He spoke about leadership and also what he expects to happen in the coal industry and at some of the sector's pressing challenges, while also outlining his vision for a responsible transition to cleaner energy.
Retiring is a good thing. I finally made it to the nerve center of 702 land. Thank you.
Well, we're very grateful that you came. Yeah. I think whenever the time I spent on Google looking and preparing for tonight, and I noticed you included it in your LinkedIn profile as well, is that you grew up in Gokomere, particular part of Zimbabwe. It's near Masvingo. If you look at it on a map, you went to a Roman Catholic school. They're still up. They're still going. They still have a website I saw today. What was that kind of community like at the time? I mean, Zimbabwe's changed a lot over the years.
Zimbabwe has been blessed with lots of mission schools. So all my schooling life was through mission schools. I went to Pakame for primary. Actually, Gokomere was a small part of my high school education. I went to Sarin Mission, one of the oldest missions in Zimbabwe, which was an Anglican mission. Then I went to Gokomere. And something quite significant happened at Gokomere because I met my wife. So we've been together for that long.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think, so we talk about education all the time in South Africa. Was there something about the quality of that education that helped you along the path that maybe young people in many government schools here don't get anymore?
I hold the view that the Rhodesian government did one thing right for the black population of then Rhodesia in Zimbabwe. They never denied us quality education. We continue to get Cambridge education all the way into independence. And when Robert Mugabe came on, the 2 things that he prioritized, actually, if you think about it, was education and free health. And they built schools everywhere. But with very good quality education, and I think that set us up. And for people like me, who education was a ticket to changing your circumstance, I was really lucky to have been born where I was born.
I mean, I noticed that you spent some time at Columbia, and I was fascinated by this. I mean, Columbia's in the States. It's a big place. It's well known. It's fighting with Donald Trump. Everybody is. It's quite a journey from Gokomere to Columbia. I mean, did you ever, while you were there, look back and think, gosh, it started a long way away?
That part of the journey is an interesting one for a young person who grew up in the circumstances that I grew up. Because what tends to happen is you're never really sure how good you can be.
Yeah.
Until you get to a place like Columbia where you begin to mix with colleagues from all over the world. In fact, in my class, there were 40 of us from 34 different countries. And all of a sudden, you begin to understand what world-class leadership looks like. But secondly, you actually just realize I belong. I can be just as good as the next guy. And I think it just gives you so much confidence and just liberates you to be yourself, to go out there and seek to be the best version, not of the next guy, not of Jack Welch, but of yourself.
You get away from the idea, well, I can only be as good as this place. And in fact, you become July Ndlovu.
The best version of July Ndlovu. And there's only one of you.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah.
You studied metallurgy. You studied the science of metal.
Yeah.
Was there something about mining that you wanted to do already by that stage, quite a young person?
Actually, interestingly, I tell my friends that I'm a failed medical student because I lasted one semester.
Longer than me.
And then what happened was somewhere along the way in that first semester, I met a guy called Harry Calver. He was a senior executive, technical director of Anglo-American Zimbabwe then. And he started talking about mining and the things that you can do in mining, the difference you can make for communities where they were actually mining, the role that metals and minerals actually play in the developmental story of humanity. I just felt, shucks, these guys are doing something really cool. It's different to actually spending time in a theater. So I just switched immediately. I'd found my passion.
Sure. And you enjoyed that immediately. You were studying. It's one thing to decide to do something, but now you're actually doing it. You're working in mining. Did you find that actually that passion stayed with you?
I was lucky to work for an organization as big as Anglo-American because what it provided was such a varied experience. In fact, I've only worked for two organizations, Anglo-American and Tingela. But in reality, I worked in so many different places, so many different experiences. If you can imagine, I started in coal. I went to ferrochrome, from ferrochrome to nickel to PGMs, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and full circle back to coal. Different organizations. Although you're an Anglo-American, you're experiencing so many different things, so many different markets, so many different commodities, different challenges, and it just grows you as a human being.
So you spend a lot of time kind of in the science of mining, managing mining, and then at some point the kind of, I don't know, did leadership tap you on the shoulder? Did someone tap you on the shoulder? Was it quite a transition going from kind of science of mining to sort of leadership? When do you think you sort of first found yourself in a kind of leadership position?
Probably around about the mid-90s. I made leadership positions, first line management quite early in my career as a youngster. And at that point in time, obviously, you're full of yourself. You think you're the best, you know everything. In fact, you almost think the guys who promoted you don't know enough and you want to change everything. So I've been fortunate to be in leadership positions probably for the greater part of my career. That transition, more often than not, is not something that you get prepared for. Because you train as an engineer, mostly as an individual contributor. In fact, we engineers think we are the smartest thing in any industry we go into. And all of a sudden, you're now being asked to get the best out of other people. And that's a transition just generally, both in mining and most manufacturing organizations, we don't prepare young people very well for.
What makes a good leader? And I suppose, I could walk past any bookshop in any airport in the world and they would have a leadership section. And I often think, maybe I've got it wrong, but there's just a lot of nonsense there. In your experience, you've been with some of the best leaders in the world, some of the best leadership teachings in the world. What works? I can think of certain things off the top of my head. Setting an example is one, is being decisive maybe another. What for you is the kind of key to it, actually getting the best out of people? Because lots of people try and lead and they fail.
You're so right. Leadership is about followers. Sometimes we forget that to be a leader, you've got to have followers. But it also teaches you that, in fact, to be a leader yourself, you have to be a good follower. So this idea of taking people along with you, irrespective of what it is, and realizing that, in fact, people choose to follow you. There's not much you can do. It doesn't matter whether it's in politics or in business. actually, when you stand in front of people with an idea that you want people to buy into, always remember that people are making a choice. Is this an idea that we're willing to give our very best to realize or not? So that's the first thing about leadership that I learned over the last 3 decades and a bit. The other one really about what makes good leaders is to realize what delivers difference. And it doesn't matter whether difference is in sport or in business, delivering good results. Actually, it's about realizing that we're not short of good ideas. In fact, you know what? You can hire a consulting organization, it could be McKinsey, and they'll give you brilliant ideas. But there's one thing they'll never give you, is how to translate those ideas into results, which is executing. And therefore, how do you build good teams that are complementary and willing to get together, to work together to deliver superior results, better than the next guy? Because in mining, if you think about it, generally we all are endowed with good resources. What differentiates the winner from the non-winner is how well we execute to deliver that value into the marketplace.
Is it about putting the right team together? Is it about, you talk about a vision? Is it about something else? I mean, clearly you've got to sell people on the idea, almost make them almost make them think it's not quite theirs, but give them ownership of it.
You know, the idea of selling, this concept that we say you got to sell the idea is important, but the idea itself must be compelling. But actually, that's not the biggest part of building winning teams. Building winning teams is about bringing together a group of people who can complement each other in a way that together they are better than the sum of the individual parts. And secondly, it's just about you as a leader realizing how do you surround yourself with people who are willing to go to war with you, who are willing to hold you on your shoulders, that they can buy so much into whatever simple idea that you've got, that not only do they support it, but they can actually build it into a much better idea. Because ultimately, if you think about it, I mean, we all think the most transformational leaders are the ones we've got these blinding insights and ideas. You do find the odd anomalies like Elon Musk. But most of us are just ordinary human beings who are able to orchestrate thousands of people who are willing to take sometimes ideas which are not well formed and just mold it into a winning formula.
Is leadership in Southern Africa harder than in other places? We have very diverse groups of people. Sometimes we argue with each other until someone from outside Southern Africa comes, and then we all fight together against that person, I sometimes think. But is leadership harder in Southern Africa than in other places?
You know, since I've now had the opportunity to have a business in Australia and we set a business in Dubai, I used to believe on this mantra that if you have worked in South Africa and Southern Africa, you probably have had the best training, and because it's quite tough to operate here. But the reality is actually you find every jurisdiction, every culture has its own challenges and differences. It's not about whether it's harder here or not. Is whether you're able to understand the local narrative and the belief systems that make people wake up day in, day out wanting to give their best. And your ability to harness that latent energy to make people give that extra discretionary effort. And it doesn't matter where it is.
July Ndlovu, your special shapeshifter tonight, the CEO at Thungela Resources. You'll be pleased to hear, July, have some questions about mining. There was a time about 5 years ago when people started to get very excited about how the world was changing and moving away from coal. There's quite a strong environmental lobby in South Africa. We know, for example, what happens around Eskom's coal-fired power stations. Did you ever think, there are more and more ways to generate electricity. How long do you think we'll be using coal for?
Steve, do you want me to disappoint you or you want me to tell you the truth? Firstly, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no one knows. But I mean,
no,
as you
no
see
one
the world,
really knows, other than to say that I think most people who have written the obituary for coal will be disappointed. Because the reality is, and if you go back, I mean, I've been talking about coal since 5 years, which is the window you're talking about. If you look at the emerging markets, Southeast Asia, Africa to some extent, where there's billions of people who still need to come out of energy poverty into the kind of modern energy services that the first world actually experience. What they need is access to a reliable, affordable source of energy. This idea that they've got to have a choice, a binary choice of either fossil fuels, coal in particular, or renewables, for me, is a false choice.
Yeah.
I think these energy sources can coexist, and that certainly is what we're seeing. And China is a very good example. China is deploying renewables faster than anybody else combined on the globe today, and yet they're building new power stations. Is that reality that if you want to continue to drive economic prosperity, particularly in the emerging markets, you can't wish away this energy source that most people would love to hate?
No, sure. I mean, I get that. I do wonder if we're kind of at peak coal or very close to peak coal, and then usage will start to go down possibly quite quickly.
I think we probably are at peak coal, if you ask my opinion. Yeah. The decline is going to depend on a number of things. And I think what has slowed down decline is, in some instance, the activists have been their own worst enemies by exaggerating the extinction of humanity if we continue to use coal. That's one. But secondly, this idea of energy security has become a far more dominant issue in developing energy policy in a lot of countries. And you're beginning to see countries say, we can't rely firstly on a concentration of energy from one region and or only imported energy. Sure. And therefore, countries that have got coal within their own borders are beginning to develop that as a resource to secure their own energy sources going forward. And I think that is what is going to slow the decline from what it ordinarily would have been.
That was July Ndlovu reflecting on his leadership principles that have guided him really through a shifting landscape of Southern Africa's coal industry.
The best of the Money Show
on 702.
702.
Your consumer ninja, Wendy Knowler, she was fascinating actually about the cost of home deliveries. And we're talking about food that comes to your door, hot and ready to eat. It's wonderful. It's also expensive. And she looked at how this can actually undermine your financial stability. It costs you money, and it costs you a lot more money than you might think. Wendy Knowler.
So I have to say it was a bank's press release which prompted this discussion, which is quite unusual for me. But so as you say, those little motorbikes are not just foods that has been ordered from delivery apps such as Uber Eats and Mr. D, but also your grocery delivery. So we're not talking about grocery deliveries. We're talking here about people who want to eat, and then they go onto the app, click, and there comes the little motorbike with their food. And what Standard Bank did during the course of last month, which is savings month or non-saving months for most South Africans, as it turns out, they took a look at what kinds of things their clients were routinely spending their money on. In other words, habits that if they tweak them a bit, because nobody wants to go cold turkey on anything, if they spent a little bit more mindfully, they could actually create a new habit of redirecting that money. And the two have to go hand in hand. You've got to just save, you've got to spend it mindfully, put it away into a fund, into an account for emergency spending, because it's not happening. Too many South Africans are saying they want to save for a rainy day, because we know through experience that rainy days happen, and they happen quite often, but it's actually not happening. So here is how the bank's head of money management and advisory, Dorette Uester, put it.
So in the context of Savings Month, at Standard Bank, we want to have the conversation around practical ways, to free up cash flow and to actually get the money to save. So as part of this exercise, we looked at individual spending across different income categories and, categorized what people are spending on. So one of the things we looked at is subscriptions. Another thing we looked at is things like spending on takeaways and especially food delivery, etc. So really to have the conversation around, yes, we all know it's important to save, but how do I start practically doing it? And if we're saying times are tough and it's difficult, to save, what are some of the ideas that we can start sharing with individuals to say, maybe look at this? And it's not necessarily to say, stop spending on a certain item or certain category, but it's more to say, if you just take a bit of that money and you start redirecting it towards a savings account, what can the impact of that be? And how can you actually use that to kickstart your savings?
Okay, so that's what they wanted to do. What levels of sort of spending on food delivery apps did they actually find?
It was quite an eye-opener, Stephen, I have to say. First of all, more than 45% of their clients across the board have no accessible emergency savings at all. And then among private banking clients, earning between $25,000 and $58,000 a month, more than a third of them have no emergency savings at all either. So Eustace says, we know that growing one's income isn't always easy because there are external factors we can't control. But obviously we can control what we're spending on takeaways, right?
You've got to control what you can control. Now, we can't make as much money as we want, but we only spend as much as we need to and want, I suppose.
Yeah, and, those of us whose work or home address is very well known to the Mr. D's and the Uber Eats drivers, the starting point would be to actually, let's look at it. Let's be mindful. What are we actually spending on these apps? And you don't have to do any maths. You just have to go into your order history on the app or apps, and it will tell you all. Standard Bank's data shows that customers spend on average 775 Rand a month on takeout and food delivery from 14 major fast food or quick service restaurants, as the industry calls them, QSR franchises. And as I said, that's not including groceries and supermarket meals. So it's the customers in the late 20s and 30s who are most guilty, in inverted commas, of this. They're hugely embracing it. This is the way to go. And the higher the income that they're earning, the more they spend. Those earning more than 60 or around 60,000 spend 1,000 Rand monthly, going up to around 1,300 a month during holidays. Lower to middle income earners, those earning under 20,000, spend 472 Rand. And those earning 25,000 a month, 615 Rand a month. That's a lot, Stephen.
So, it sort of edges up, right? You don't kind of realize how much you're spending on this because you never sit down and work out what it's costing you a month.
Well, that's the thing. I think that applies. And Dorothy used to mention subscriptions as well. We don't want to go into that here, but that's another thing that every month coming off your credit cards. And I think part of it, Stephen, is you're not handing over money. You're not handing over cash. It's not this conscious, okay, here's 68 Rand or whatever. It's all click done coming off your card, and I think that adds to it. And I just wanted to add something that bank press release didn't mention, and I think a lot of people don't actually realize, is that the food's not costing you extra over and above what you would pay if you ordered and collected yourself or went and ate inside one of those QSR places. It's not just the delivery fee of 20 Rand or whatever, but all the restaurants actually, according to News 24's report back in 2023, they investigated this quite in depth. And most national chains charge between 20% and 30% more for meals than what their menu prices are for normally. So that they add on their app costs for being on those apps to their customers. And that is a lot, 20 to 30%. Then you're paying delivery on top of it. And that's going to erode your bank account quite nicely if you're a regular.
Yeah, very quickly. Okay, so, do you just stop doing it automatically? Do you go cold turkey or do it another way?
I don't think cold turkey is a good thing. We're human beings are resistant to that. So don't order as often, or reduce the cost of your takeaways. So don't pay the delivery fee, don't pay the app markup price. Go and collect yourself or sit in the restaurant. It's this convenience, click and there it comes on the scooter thing. That's taking away money. That if we save the money, don't just save the money. That you put it away and have a goal, or just when your car breaks down and you've got to suddenly find 8,000 rand. I mean, for most people that'll set them back for months, and they're borrowing here, and that's more interest, and it's a drama. So the one of 2 or 3 fewer takeaway meals, or not having the scooter come to your door. The trade-off is that you've got peace of mind, and it isn't this emotional trauma when suddenly you need to find extra money that you don't have.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, in the end, basically, the moral of the story is, and this is something you learn when you leave your late 20s and early 30s, is that convenience costs.
Absolutely. So it's other forms of food as well. I mean, if you go into a supermarket, there's so many products on the shelves that are screaming, pick me because I'm quick and convenient. And we're all like, our lives are so busy. And look, let's do it the quickest, easiest way. All that convenience costs. So if you buy the instant oats instead of spending a whole 2 or 3 minutes cooking the oats the traditional way on the stove, it's going to cost you a lot more over time. The pre-cut and bagged veggies, oh, great, so convenient, rather than cutting your own butternut or whatever. All these purchase decisions might seem petty. The pre-cooked sauces, instead of just spending 2 minutes doing it yourself, they all add up. And all those habits collectively are what are some of the things that are stopping us, from being able to put a little bit away to help ourselves for when those inevitable dramas happen to us.
That was Wendy Knowler offering an important reminder, I think, about while food delivery apps are very convenient, they're great, especially on a Friday night, they can also have a big impact on your financial well-being.
702. You are listening to The Money Show's best bits.
Our personal finance segment, Warren Ingram, co-founder of Galileo Capital, he looked at the Reserve Bank's recent interest rate cut. He explained what this means to you, but also some advice on how to make some smart financial moves as the landscape changes. Essentially, how to better manage an interest rate cut.
It's almost one of the fundamental aspects of all of our lives. So it impacts the way we spend, it impacts the way we live, and for a lot of us, debt is a reality, and so interest rates become even more important. The more debt we have, and as we know, our country is super indebted. So anything to do with interest rates has almost a multiplied effect on our lives. So you're right. I mean, I think quite a lot of people kind of get lost in the news of, okay, the Reserve Bank's done this, and actually missing the point that it's bricks and mortar for us. It really has a day-to-day impact.
Okay, so there are lots of different things we can do to try and take advantage of this. When interest rates go down, what's the good news? What does get cheaper? Because it's not good for everybody.
It's not good for everybody. The thing that starts immediately is if I'm sitting with a huge amount of credit card debt or personal loans or overdrafts, if the banks are doing their job correctly, very soon after the Reserve Bank announces a drop in interest rates, it means my debt gets cheaper immediately thereafter. So, a day or a week later, they'll obviously hold out a little bit, the banks, they never want to miss an opportunity, but it means that my credit card repayments get a bit less. And when you're paying your interest at, let's say, 25% a year, any breathing space that you get, 0.25% doesn't sound like a number, but let's say it's, your credit card, your personal loan, your car, and your mortgage, it becomes hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of rands impact in South Africans' back pocket that almost instantaneously.
What gets less attractive? I mean, it's not. There are other things that happen as well. It's not just one thing.
So what happens now is you get the people sitting with cash, especially retirees. Retirees will often store a bit too much money. They won't be listening to their financial planners and who say don't hold cash. And they'll start complaining because they're saying, well, 2 years ago I was earning 10,000 rand a month of interest and it was really great. Now 2 years later, interest rates have been coming down. Now I'm earning 8,000. So cash becomes an unattractive place increasingly as interest rates come down. If all the prognosticators are right and we don't get any more interest rate cuts, it's still reasonably attractive to earn interest now. The interest rates are still quite high actually, but it is less and less attractive. And remember, you might be getting paid 7% interest, you're giving our friends at SARS 3% of that for tax. So actually then you're earning 4%. And, if your cost of living is going up at 6 or 7, then you're going backwards. So cash is the thing you don't really want to hold in a falling interest rate environment.
Are there particular types of investments that sort of lose their appeal? Are there particular things that actually, is there a particular category maybe that really suddenly don't start to make sense anymore?
Money markets, fixed deposits, even RSA retail savings bonds, which I really like, they will now issue new bonds into the future at a lower rate. So that category, that class of investment will perform worse.
So those would all sort of be conservative investments, right? That kind of thing.
Very cautious, very conservative. And why it's impactful is it's often the antidote to the very aggressive investment. So if you're retired and you need equities because you need to protect against inflation, you hold a lot of cash and that helps you and offsets all the volatility. And now all of a sudden your cash is not so rewarding. You're kind of forced to take a smaller nest egg. So an emergency fund. So it does become a problem, actually.
Are there investments that become suddenly a lot more attractive? Are there some things that actually now really, when interest rates are low or when there's a cut, you actually need to start investigating them a bit more seriously?
So government bonds or corporate bonds, typically you'll find their price, the price of a bond goes up when interest rates go down. And then the other way around. So if interest rates go up, the price goes down. So now all of a sudden you've got an investment which generally pays a rate of interest, a bond, and now you're getting capital growth as well. So that's very nice. And that's impactful for you and me, for example, because we might have it in our RA or we'll see it in a balanced unit trust. So now we're getting capital growth in those funds as well. And then property companies that trade on the stock exchange or even, normal properties, the property companies, their prices tend to rise a bit when interest rates go down because they all have debt. They'll call it gearing, whatever, but they've borrowed money. They're buying properties. So the less they have to spend on funding interest, the better for them.
There's a particular property company, a real estate company, that before each monetary policy committee decision the day before sends me a press release with their CEO demanding that interest rates be cut. It's a pretty self-interested argument, isn't it? It
is, and I think we probably don't have time to get into why the Reserve Bank's doing what they're doing, etc., why interest rates are high. But having said that, that is a self-interest argument because actually the thing that really wipes us out is the cost of living, is inflation. So whatever we can do to keep inflation down and keep it under control, which actually is interest rates, I think is a good thing. And it's a known factor. So the property companies must deal with it. It's known. It's a known. They can do their jobs despite the interest rate.
It's good to hear your questions tonight for Warren Ingram, the co-founder of Galileo Capital, a certified financial planner. He's actually with us in the studio. 011-883-0702, 021-446-0567. I'm sure you have a thought or two about where we are with interest rates right now after that cut last week. Okay, so Warren, interest rates get cut. It's a Friday morning. I sort of wake up and I'm reminded in the EWN news bulletin, oh yes, Lesetja Kganyago made this announcement yesterday. So now they're down. What are some of the things that I should do almost immediately?
Well, one of the things to check is when interest rates come down, if you've got debt, the way that banks will help you is they'll either charge you a little bit less interest, and that means that first new repayment will drop a bit. So if you were paying 5,000 Rand a month on your debt repayment, are they dropping it from 5,000 to 4,900? Do they do that automatically? My sense is if that is the case, and they do drop it automatically, you can actually elect to maintain the original amount. So you then pay actually a little bit more. So if you said to them, don't do that, I'm happy to pay the 5,000. No one likes to pay debt, but I can cope with the 5,000. I'm used to it now. Please don't drop it. If you can live with that, what it means is you're paying your debt down faster. And I think a lot of people don't take advantage of that opportunity. So what they do is they then spend a bit more. They've got a bit more breathing room. They've got a bit more cash in the end of the month. So I think check your debt. And try and keep your repayments the same because you'll get that debt paid much faster. If you can't do that, have a look at the interest that you're paying on all of the debts that you've got, and the one that's costing you the most, at least continue repaying that one. So at least you pay down the most expensive debt, the highest interest rate first. That would be the very first thing I do on the first day that those interest rates are going to come down.
So it's likely that you're paying, say, a higher interest rate on a car, but it is a smaller and of shorter duration debt than your bond.
Yeah.
But if you put more money into your bond more earlier, doesn't that mean over a longer term you'll get more value for that?
You are right, except that for me, the interest rate you're being charged is actually the expensive thing. So I would rather take a little bit longer to pay off the mortgage at the start. So take a bit of time there, because if you get the car paid off quickly or more quickly, that means you can take the entire car payment, chuck that into the mortgage as well, and then you make a really big impact. So I think there is no investment in the world that grows as fast as your credit card debt, for example.
Yeah.
So actually pay down the credit card debt, then pay down the car, then pay down the mortgage in that order. The trick is not to then go and buy a new car just as you've paid off the old car. That's the thing where we all get caught out.
Indeed, yes. It's 13 minutes now to 8. You with The Money Show. Your questions for Warren Ingram. Okay, what do you do with your investments? Rates suddenly go down. Are there any changes or anything you need to do with actually your investments? How do you sort of approach that? Because you're thinking slightly longer term here.
You are, and I think so. We've spoken about checking your debt and restructure the debt. Next question is, does the mix? I'm not allowed to say the D word anymore because you always rip me off. Diversification. So you've got a diversified portfolio. Is it still correctly diversified? So do you still have the correct allocation to shares, to bonds, to property? Remember, interest rates have gone down, so now the price of bonds has gone up. Does that skew your whole portfolio? Yeah. Because if it does, what you might want to do is just check the balance. The other one we didn't really speak about much and is falling interest rates are great for the stock market. So you might find that your bonds have gone up and the stock market part of your portfolio has gone up. So check the balance, make sure it's correct, and then reposition, because interest rates don't change a lot. So to reposition your portfolio because of that is good news. It's a good thing to do.
Is it also a good moment to check your emergency fund? If you're saving just a touch more, maybe you can sort of put some more money into that?
Either top up your emergency fund, or if you've done well and your emergency fund is a bit overfunded now, it's not so rewarding anymore to have extra cash, so maybe you drop it down. So for most of us, it's actually top up the emergency fund. But for some of us, it could be, okay, let me take some out and actually put it into equities or shares or bonds or something like that.
Warren, JJ's question, I want to know if there is an easy way to work out how much money I need to retire. And I suppose if someone were to say, how much money do you need to retire? All of it.
And some more.
Yes.
I think I want to kind of start with just the psychology lesson quickly, because when people do the number, and I'll answer the question, they might get a little depressed. And maybe the thing to understand is when you do the calculation and you've still got some time to go to retirement, the trick is, can you narrow that gap from 1 year to the next to the next? So if the gap is wide between what you have and what you should have, are you making that gap shrink? And if you are, that's progress. So don't lose hope when I give you the way of calculating. And I think you can do a fairly simple rule of thumb, which is you take all of your expenses in a typical year. Now, if you've got kids and they're at school or varsity, whatever the deal is, remember they're not going to be there. Hopefully, by the time you've retired, you've done that job. So you take your expenses as they are today, and you just take out the expenses that you know will disappear. Then, if you buy a car every 10 years or every 5 years, take 1/5, if it's every 5 years, 1/5 of the car expense, add that to your annual expense. So you get to a number. Let's just say you end up spending 100,000 a year of normal expenses every year. Take that and multiply it by 25. That gives you your retirement number. It's not perfect. It's a rule of thumb, but gee, it is pretty good. I've done that rule of thumb, and then I check it with very sophisticated calculators and modeling tools and stuff that I don't really understand, and the two end up talking a fairly similar story. So that's the answer for JJ. And as I say, year after year, if that gap between what you have and what you need is narrowing, you're doing your job.
Okay, so there is actually a way to go and do it. I mean, in a way that most people can understand.
I think so, and I mean, I think we should all know what we spend. If you don't know, to JJ, if you don't know what you're spending and you want to retire, come on, you've got to do some work, which is at least understand what you spent, and then to be able to multiply that to get to that number is not that difficult. We don't like doing it because it's a bit scary. We don't want to see what the answer is, but we can.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot happening around residential property and lower interest rates. And property prices obviously are going to be affected by interest rates. And generally speaking, they go up. Hence my weekly email from the real estate agent.
Yeah. And I think we're actually seeing a bit of anecdotal evidence that the property market in Joburg, for example, is picking up again. It's been a one-way story right now about, just the Western Cape all the time and Cape Town's pumping. And now we're seeing more and more news about property prices in Joburg picking up. And I think part of the story is around interest rates. So as interest rates come down, mortgages become more affordable. And so that becomes a positive pressure to push prices up. If you were marginal about your rent versus your mortgage, this might just put it in the situation where your mortgage now becomes affordable. The thing about property prices is they don't move like the stock exchange. They don't go instantaneously. So if you were thinking about buying, and you were on the fence, don't sit for too long. You can now use this as an opportunity to get in.
We're speaking to Warren Ingram tonight of Voice Note coming through on 072 702 1702.
Evening, Stephen and Warren. Just a quick one, man. So how much more percentage must you pay on a bond to reduce it from, on a monthly basis, to reduce it from 20 years to 15 years, for instance? So how much more must you put in on top of the normal bond to reduce it by 5 years over that period? I'll listen on the radio. Thank you, Kiki.
Thanks, TK. It's a great question, and I don't know if it's possible to actually work it out. If you've got a 20-year bond and you want to now reduce it to a 15, you want to pay it back in 15 years, how much more as a percentage each month would you need to pay? I suppose it might depend on all sorts of things.
Yeah, those maths problems we were given at school with the story sums, it sounds like one of those, and I was notoriously bad at those, so I don't have a good answer. I think you can probably do a calculation. Just go online. There's lots of these bond calculators, and it'll tell you. So a short answer to say I don't know, but I do think this kind of a drop, a 0.25% drop, is not going to give you 5 years shorter on your bond. So if you continue to maintain your payments, it's going to take 6 or 9 months off, but it's not going to be 5 years.
Yeah. And TK, it's still worth doing, I've got to tell you. I think in the longer run, it is still worth doing. Okay, so when interest rates go down, we start to see more people coming into the market. But do you also need to sort of factor that into your longer term plan? You can't just rush out and buy property now.
Please don't do that. So you don't buy based on an interest rate cut. Number one, interest rates could go up again. If these tariffs just have a dramatic impact on our country and inflation goes through the roof, it might force the Reserve Bank to push rates up. It's we don't know what we don't know. So you don't buy based on that. The people that would look at this as an opportunity would be people that are renting and are seriously considering buying anyway. And this becomes the tipping point. But equally, maybe that people who are in the property market now, who own a property and were wondering what would push prices up, this is a piece of good news for you, because this is going to push prices up across all sectors right across the country, not just in one area. So it is a very positive trend, but it's not the only one. We've had a few cuts already. So there is a point where it picks up that snowball.
I suppose what people really want to try and do is to make the most out of any cut that they get. And it can actually be quite hard to know where to start. It might also help to know before there's a decision what you're actually planning to do, to have a sort of a strategy.
Yeah. Please have a game plan for your money. And I think if you're sitting with a debt issue, doing that homework to say what costs me the most, that would be step one. Or if you're not in that position and you're looking at property, do the calculation to say, can I afford the property today? Can I cover months and months of bond repayments? What happens if the geyser bursts, and what happens if I need to paint? If you can deal with all of those things, then this might just be the last thing that helps you just get over the line. But we don't make huge moves. We shouldn't because of a 0.25% interest rate cut. It's just another piece of good news.
That was Warren Ingram breaking down the implications, I should say, of the Reserve Bank's interest rate cut.
702. The best of the Money Show from this week.
This week, our business book review, Ian Mann, the Managing Director of Gateway's Business Consultants, he discussed Conquering Crisis by Admiral William H. McRaven. It's a wonderful name. McRaven has extensive military experience. Ian unpacked some powerful leadership lessons on resilience, strategic thinking, and navigating disruption.
One of the things about it is he's come up with a set of principles about how to conquer a crisis situation. It's not as much to prevent it as how you deal with it once it's happened.
Yeah.
And the book says this is the sort of book you should read before you need to.
Yes.
And I cannot emphasize that enough. Just to put McRaven in context, he was a retired 4-star general. He led the U.S. Navy SEALs, and that's the toughest people in the group, and was involved in special operations literally for America around the world. He was the fellow who went after bin Laden. He is the one who not personally, but organized the taking out Saddam Hussein. He also landed up afterwards being the Chancellor of the University of Texas. So he has both experience.
Something very appropriate there.
Very appropriate there. But the key about him is that he's got a set of 10 principles that that you really should be aware of whenever you're faced with a crisis. Now, the crises can be on any level. They can obviously be a political crisis, but they can be a family crisis or a business crisis. And there are a couple of rules that he has, and I'll share just a couple with you. The first thing is, he says that the first reports are always wrong.
Yeah, what a great way to start, actually, because that's so often the case.
And what tends to happen is that when you start and say first reports are almost always going to be wrong, be skeptical. Skeptical about what's really happening, whether the timing of the facts, what's really going on there. And you really need to be cautious about making any declarative statements before you've had a chance to say, I need to investigate what this is, so you don't put your foot into it and cause a lot of trouble. And people don't do that. I think that gets things to spin out of control unnecessarily. Another issue he talks about is having a council of colonels. A council of colonels, obviously military, so they talk colonels, but I would imagine they have a council of people that you can trust in your organization. So whenever something comes up, it's very important that it's not only your opinion, but you actually have your council of people that you really trust, not necessarily at your level, above your level, below your level, that you can call into a room and actually have a real face-to-face conversation. The other point there I love, he phrases it very, very nicely. He says, bad news doesn't get better with time. And there's a strong tendency to feel that you should cover up bad news for as long as you possibly can. And everything he talks about here is all based on experiences he's personally had in the military. There was a time when a man came out of a he's in Afghanistan trying to protect the people there, take out the bad guys, and a man comes out of the area that they are worried about with a weapon. And he's aiming at everybody, and they take him out. Turns out that he's the cousin of the president, Malaki. And he said this was the catastrophe. He phoned up Petraeus, who was running it at the time. Petraeus was quite friendly with the president, trying to develop a relationship with him. Yeah. He says he was very, but this wasn't just a man being killed. This was the president's nephew.
Sure.
And because of that, he instead of trying to dull it down, he phoned him at 3:30 in the morning, got him out of bed, and told him what was happening. He got yelled at. They eventually solved the problem together, but he said he worked brilliantly with Petraeus afterwards because Petraeus said, I know I can trust you because you'll never lie to me and you'll never withhold any information. Yeah. And I think that that's absolutely critical. Another incident they had in Afghanistan was they were tracking groups of people. And you're tracking them with all sorts of really fancy stuff, but you lose contact because the mountains, because all. Yeah. But they got these guys and they really looked like a bunch of terrorists. Once they were absolutely pretty sure that they were terrorists, they did take them out. Now the problem with them, whether they were terrorists or farmers, is what they had to track, and they tracked them for hours. They've got incredible surveillance abilities, and the newspapers came out and said that they bombed and killed a group of all they were farmers. And the reporters who were most vicious, the very next day he invited them to come to the JOC, where they do the work and the analysis. He showed them exactly what they do. He showed them how they work, how they come to decisions, how they analyze, how long they track, and before they make a decision. He said by inviting them in to see what was actually happening, and he weaponized the truth.
Yeah.
And by weaponizing the truth, he said the article in the newspaper, one of them stopped vilifying without, and the other one muted himself quite a lot.
Just before we go any further, In the States, there's this idea where people who work in the military and high-ranking military officers must always be right. We don't have that here.
Yes.
A very different view. Does that sort of come across? He's used to clearly being obeyed and used to being seen as always right.
I think that could happen, but I think that what probably has happened is there's so many people that of all the people, you need to come across the one that you think is rightist.
Yeah.
And I think that when he looks like a man of good values, but he also seems to be a man who's quite used to being. One last thing, and I'll share this with you. He says that there's always time for a morale check.
Yeah.
He was at the University of Texas. He bought a huge piece of land on behalf of the University of Texas to do a development, and went south. It was a complete mess and was a waste of money and waste of time. And the press. He has to go before the chancellors and everybody else, and the press really takes him out. And he's sitting in his office, and a man comes to his secretary and says, "I'd like to speak to McRaven." And the secretary said, "I don't think now is the right time." And he just shouts out, he shouts out, "Moral check." And he said he knew what moral check was. He said in the army, when somebody gets beaten up or is vilified, whatever it is, you go to them and you do a morale check. Morale check is to see that he's okay. And he said this man came in and said to him, "Boy, you've caused so much trouble in Afghanistan. I always wonder how come you always get these top positions. Here you go, messed up again." And they laughed together. And by the time it was all over, the discussions, he said he was really glad that this man had told him and come there to support him. And I think it's terribly important when people are in those situations, whether it's your staff or other people see to it that you have a morale check.
That was Ian Mann, a compelling look into the book Conquering Crisis and the leadership wisdom of Admiral William H. McRaven.
702. You're listening to The Money Show's best bits.
You've been listening to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of our best conversations from the show this week. If you'd like to hear more, you can go to our website or your favorite podcast app and search for The Money Show. Thanks for listening. We're back on The Money Show, 6 o'clock on Monday. Have a good weekend.